Menopause is on at 9 o'clock tonight on BBC Two for viewers in Scotland, and it's available to everyone on the BBC iPlayer. Very pleased to say Kirsty Walk is here with us now to talk about all of that. Also Diane Danzebrink, who went through the menopause after a hysterectomy. Professor Janice Reimer from the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, who runs a menopause clinic. Professor Clym Macpherson, visiting Professor of Public Health Epidemiology at Oxford University, who's written many papers on HRT, and also joining us from Shropshire, Julie Chandler, who experienced severe menopause side effects. Thank you all, welcome. Kirsty, I mean, like so many normal things that we all go through, we don't actually know that much about it until something actually happens to you, and then you think, why didn't I know? People will be experiencing symptoms and not actually even knowing they're symptoms of menopause.
Well, that's absolutely right. And the idea that something called low mood affects a lot of women, who then go to their GPs, and some GPs don't prescribe antidepressants, but some do prescribe, and that is actually not the treatment that you should be having. And it's the very fact that we don't discuss it, and we all go through it, and we all go through it usually around the age of 50, height of careers, and yet it's something that is some kind of taboo, and I just want everybody to say, look, we need to talk about this, we need to talk about how to deal with it, and all the various treatments that women actually are entitled to.
And you say, I mean, people obviously going through it at height of careers now. No one ever likes to expose something that looks like a weakness and a vulnerability.
Absolutely.
And there is that perception around it.
And there is that perception, but you know what? I'm not sure it would be the same if all men went through the menopause. What do you think, Joanna?
I think, well, let's ask the man here. What do you think?
I've been through the menopause and survived. We do have menopause, it's not quite the same.
Okay. Well, let's talk more about all of your experiences then, because, I mean, Kirsty, you had like an instant menopause, didn't you?
Yeah, I had to have a hysterectomy, and the decision during my consultant said, you're having a hysterectomy, do you want to keep your ovaries or not? And of course, ovarian cancer is very much a hidden killer. Yeah. I had my kids, and I wasn't going to be having any more because I was obviously having a hysterectomy, and I thought, no, it's all going. And it all went, so instantly I went into menopause, and so therefore the next morning, straight after the operation, I started taking HRT.
And it worked.
And it worked, and I felt great. And then two things happened. There was the study, the big study in America, but also a friend of mine who was on HRT for 10 years and had a precancerous breast lump, was told by a GP best to get off it. And the trouble is, that then makes you feel nervous and makes you feel worried, and so I went cold turkey.
Okay, and Diane, you had a hysterectomy as well, didn't you? And I mean, you had obviously a horrible time because you had the ovarian cancer scare.
Yeah.
So you had the hysterectomy, instant menopause. What was it like for you?
Pretty hideous, and that's mainly because I hadn't been given the information that I needed to make a decision.
Were you not given any warning about what would happen?
I had my hysterectomy, and I left the hospital after 2 days, but I wasn't given any information. I was told to go and see my GP in a few weeks' time, which I did. But unfortunately, my mum had had ovarian cancer, so I was aware that there was a type of HRT, but it was not one that I was willing to take because of the way that it was made. It's animal derived. Thankfully, it's it's quite restricted in its use now in the UK. But I didn't realise there was a second body identical type of HRT. And so for that reason, I chose to go and see a clinic and try and take some herbs and some minerals, which was never going to do it for somebody in my position who'd had their ovaries removed. But there was no information for me about that. So eventually, when things got really hideous, and a lot of it for me was emotional and mental, I ended up essentially in a really deep, dark place where I considered taking my own life. And at that point, my husband picked me up, took me to the doctors, which he'd been trying to persuade me to do for ages, but I was terrified of going because I thought all they're going to do is put me on antidepressants. Went back to the doctors, and she said, well, you have a choice. There's a second type of HRT, and it's plant-derived, and it's body identical. And
why did it take so long?
Good question. Crikey. But you say that, but it takes that long. There are I run an organisation now called Menopause Support, which supports women, and I speak to women every week of every day who are struggling to get the right information, or they're turning up at the GP surgery and the GP doesn't know what to tell them.
Let's bring in Julie, because Julie, you also had early surgical menopause because of ovarian cancer. Did it feel like a taboo to you when you suddenly were plunged into menopause?
Well, I had my ovaries out as a preventative because I was at high risk of cancer. But it was a terrible shock for me in terms of the symptoms I had. I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't have information. I had to fight to get HRT. I was led to believe by my genetic counsellor, who supported me through the surgeries, that I would be put on HRT. But my surgeon and GP both said I shouldn't because I was BRCA. I had BRCA2 positive genes, so I was at high risk of breast and ovarian cancer, and they said no way. But like some of your other guests, the symptoms I had were just unbelievable. There was no way I could function as a normal, professional woman going about her life without some sort of help. And having tried everything else out there, again, like one of your guests in the studio, there was nothing else that was doing anything to help the symptoms, and I just needed something serious that was going to help me, and finally I managed to get on the HRT, which just put everything right and back to normal again.
Janice, you're the Vice President of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. I mean, it sounds like, talking obviously to these women and many others out there, that HRT is a no-brainer, but it's been through its controversies.
Well, it's been through its controversies, but I agree. I think it's a no-brainer for women. And I'm a clinician. I see women all the time coming to the clinic who are really doing the dance of the desperates. Their quality of life is shocking. Particularly professional women are just not functioning at the level that they were before, and HRT can completely transform their life. As well as that, they're getting protection against cardiovascular disease. It's looking after, and it's looking after their bones. So I agree. I think it's a complete no-brainer that women who are having symptoms and are feeling lousy should be going on to hormone replacement therapy. And I think what Kirsty said is absolutely right, that this scandal that's happened against women because of the study that came out in 2002, we've got this whole generation of GPs and doctors in training who will not prescribe HRT. They're terrified of it. Fortunately, I think the pendulum is swinging back now, and women are getting more information, they're desperate for information, they're getting more educated. But we've got this whole generation of women who've been deprived of hormone replacement therapy, and I think that's scandalous.
And the NICE guidelines, the new NICE guidelines that came out at the end of 2015 said that every single woman should have individualised care from a GP. Every woman that's having any symptoms needs to go to a GP and sit there until they get some positive advice. Because women just don't go because they don't think that there's anything for them.
Professor Clint McPherson, you're not so convinced by HRT.
Well, I'm convinced by HRT as a cure for some of the symptoms
but you're
of
concerned
menopause.
more concerned about the side effects.
It is very good for curing the menopausal symptoms, no question. And women who have serious menopausal symptoms need HRT. I have no doubt about that, and should take it. But it does carry risks, and if you look at the epidemiology properly, you can't say that it protects against cardiovascular disease, because it doesn't. It increases the risk of cardiovascular disease and increases the risk of breast cancer.
Not if it's taken at the time of ovarian failure, it's not.
I mean, that's
yes, it is.
but that's a side note anyway.
Showed just that.
Whether you think
you probably haven't read
whether you think it protects against something else or not, that's not a harm.
What?
Well, you say it protects, that you're questioning whether it protects against cardiovascular disease. It's not a side effect if you're sort of debating whether it gives an extra protection.
It increases the risk of stroke and it increases the risk of MI.
But by how much?
Not a lot.
Exactly.
But that's the thing, is you've just said that, and there are going to be millions of
women
who are going to sit out there and say, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have it. But it's about quality of life.
I agree with you completely.
Absolutely is about quality of life.
I completely agree with you. But what is said is that it protects against cardiovascular disease. It doesn't.
It provides some protection against cardiovascular disease if taken at the time of ovarian failure, and
not.
You know that.
I don't.
The studies that were quoted in WHI and HERS, the mean age of a woman was 63. I've never, as a clinician, de novo, started HRT in a woman at 63. You start at the time of menopause, and if you do that, you provide some protection against cardiovascular disease.
Can I tell you about a study that we did, which was to take all the submissions to the regulator from manufacturers who had done smallish trials of 100 or 200 or 300 people, randomised to HRT or not, and they were all menopausal, they were all age 50, they were taking HRT, and if you pull all those studies together, of which there are 300, and we published this in The Lancet, there is a small increase in cardiovascular disease, which is completely the same as the increase in cardiovascular disease that the WHI study showed. So it is the case that it does not protect against cardiovascular disease at the very best.
The sort of big initial controversy obviously was about breast cancer risk, and that is now the guidance on that has now been completely changed.
Yes, I know, because there's a strong vested interest to believe HRT is safe because.
So you don't believe it?
Oh, it causes breast cancer.
Now, wait a minute. You cannot say, you just simply cannot put out a statement that says that HRT causes breast cancer. HRT does not cause breast cancer. And you would know that better than I, if menopause matters, can qualify that.
Absolutely. Can we also put this in perspective? You're talking about HRT causing breast cancer. No, I don't believe it causes breast cancer at all. Obesity is a much bigger risk factor for causing breast cancer than HRT. It is. I'm a clinician, I'm an academic, I've done research trials in hormone replacement therapy, and I think if you're a clinician actually dealing with women, then you have to appreciate improving quality of life, improving their longevity, actually, and not scaremongering women about the risk of breast cancer.
I want to bring in actually some comments, because we are getting so many comments, as you would imagine, from women watching, talking about exactly that point on the quality of life. Hayley says, I'm 42 years old, I suffered premenopausal symptoms for years, and I think doctors should provide women with nutritional advice as food changes how your symptoms develop. I changed all my foods and have no symptoms. I had no support from doctors or help. How much training in nutrition do doctors go through in their training? Email from Jan, I had terrible hot flushes until a friend recommended a natural bioidentical progesterone cream. I had numerous other symptoms which seem to have lessened or gone. It's been a complete lifesaver. Carol emailed, I went through the menopause at 52 after being on HRT for 10 years. Fortunately, I didn't suffer too badly with hot flushes. I'm now 64, have had no libido for 6 years, and I've been unable to have intercourse for 8 years because of it being painful. Karen emails, I was having about 12 to 15 hot flushes in 24 hours. Crikey. It was waking me up every hour throughout the night. I'm now taking natural pills containing mung beans, green tea and natural seasoning. It's cut my hot flushes in half, and I'm now sleeping through the night until 4 a.m. And Susan says, I've been on HRT for 23 years. It is the only thing that works. I used to have hot flushes and sweats sometimes every half hour. I mean, obviously, people are saying people will have different experiences and find different things work.
There is no single, there is no silver bullet, and nor are there identical symptoms. Everybody has different levels of hot flushes, perhaps some have none at all. The one I didn't know about was joint pain. I interviewed a woman who was a great runner, and suddenly she had joint pain, and she was only in her mid-40s. She couldn't believe it. And of course what it was a symptom of an early menopausal symptom.
Why aren't we told all this?
Why? It's as if you're at school and you're taught about puberty and everything else, but actually someone says, well, actually halfway through your life you'll experience different things, and you have to look out for them and so forth. No one's ever told, and we're 51% of the population.
Yes. Yes. And now, I mean, that's the thing. Obviously, you've done this documentary to get people talking about it, get people thinking about it.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's taken so long?
Is this a male-dominated world we're dealing in? I don't know. But it's right, the education in schools and universities and whatever, we just don't talk enough about the menopause, and it's a terrible thing.
Do we self-police a bit in, what we were saying earlier about the fear of revealing something about yourself that might be taken as a weakness?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
You are menopause.
Pregnancy
that's
brain,
the line. All that.
Those different.
And also the fact is that some women have these huge mood swings. Senior colleagues of mine talked about the fact that they had this red mist descends, and their family was terrified, and they couldn't control it, which is so debilitating. And we need to deal with those kind of things as well, because that is, for those women and their families and their friends, it's very, very difficult. So we need to talk about this stuff.
And their partners.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've spoken to men who, they will say, I think my wife, the thing you always hear is, I think my wife's going mad.
Yeah.
And of course she's not going mad.
In the attic.
Absolutely, she's not going mad, but perimenopausal symptoms are very often mental and emotional. Yeah. It's not flushes. Yeah. And that's the thing that, kind of particularly doctors find so difficult to recognise, and that's why we end up with so many women on antidepressants. But for families, for couples, for relationships, libido changes, nobody wants to talk about lack of sex drive, and that's a huge part of this, kind of this whole puzzle. And if we talked about it earlier, kids could help their mums.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that's very much what I had, because I didn't realise that my mother was going through an early menopause at 46 when I was 16. What a combination that was. Adolescence and a mother going to menopause.
It's a killer combination a lot of us experience, I guess. But you're right. I mean, it's good to talk. That's the thing.
It really is.
Yeah. And we've got people talking at home as well, getting in touch with us on it. So thank you. Documentary tonight.
Tonight, 9 o'clock, BBC One Scotland and the iPlayer. And we don't know what the network transmission is yet.
All right. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you. And